Now, I don't think it's a hot take to say that in the MLW, you can go from being one of the worst teams to winning the championship next year. We've seen it happen with the 2023 Magic, and we've seen it happen with a Gators team a couple years ago as well. So, in my opinion, all of the 8 teams have a chance to go back and win the championship if they just do some things. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about what I believe every team needs to do, or what a player might need to do on a certain team if that team wants to win the championship. Now, obviously, it's not a perfect world, so a lot of these things are going to be easier said than done for sure. But in my opinion, these are just things that these teams need to do if they want to have any chance at success next year, especially some of the teams that were a lot worse. The Cobras. So the Cobras did a lot of things this year that I think were positive. First of all, there was the return of Andy Duran, who, even if he's not playing at his best, his energy and defense really helps out this team. Second of all, they barely made the playoffs, but they won a pretty impressive game or series against the Magic, who were obviously the returning champions, and in that game they had a lot of energy as well. However, this team has a lot of question marks, some that I think are more concerning than a lot of teams that finish worse than them. So first of all, there was the trade that I already made a video about for Brendan Zerlag, and he has actually had a pretty decent season last year, but he's just not been doing enough and not been getting enough opportunities to warrant a trade like that out of him. So I still scratch my head when it comes to Drew Davis making that deal. And then there's also the question, which in my opinion is the most concerning thing, about Brendan Baranowski and Sean Flynn hitting. However, if I think at least one of those guys pick up their hitting next year and they make a good draft selection at 5, that this team has a pretty good chance to go far into the playoffs. And obviously, it will help if Caden Irwin stays consistent and if Brendan Baranowski can get back to where he was. The Diamondbacks. So the next team is the Diamondbacks, who actually had a really, really good season until the playoffs where they lost to the Eagles. But in my opinion, that's a really hard game to win. I think the Eagles were definitely the best team in the league this year, especially after the playoffs. They really proved that. But that game against the Eagles wasn't their best game. I definitely agree. So I think what they have to do for next year is just try and keep the core. They already have experience. They've won 2 championships within the last 3 years. Jimmy Norp will still be dominant. It's really all about just keeping all those guys in the core. And here's another thing as well. I know Pishka kind of had a sophomore slump season, but I think that he will bounce back. He's just a little bit inconsistent when he gets to the plate, and I think he's one of those players that just gets super unlucky a lot of the times. He makes good contact with the ball, but it's just right before the fence. The Magic. Of course, then, there's the question with the Magic, who I have mentioned multiple times in this video already, and in my opinion, the Magic probably have the worst chance to improve next season. I'm pretty sure they have the 3rd overall pick, and with that pick, they will need to make a good selection. That is the first thing, preferably a hitter, because that's where most of your problems lie. Also, there is the big elephant in the room, which is that Grant Miller might be retiring after this year, and if he does that, the Magic are kind of screwed. Trevor Bonham took a step back on the mound this year. I think his pitching is just too predictable. The ball doesn't really have a ton of movement on it, and it's easy for people to see. AJ Ackerman took a huge step back and struggled to make contact with the ball. You could tell Jack Agner struggled putting himself or Curdy in the starting lineup, as they were automatic outs, both of them for the most part. And then the other part of the team, the part that sucks the worst in my opinion, is the fact that this team didn't get a rookie last year. So really all they were doing was running it back with the same team without much lineup change, and their team struggled a lot more. So what do the Magic need to do? Well, the first thing you're hoping is that Grant Miller stays 100%. The second thing is you really have to get a hitter even if Grant Miller stays with that 3rd pick. I like the idea of maybe playing Bonham as your second arm, or maybe putting Grant Miller as your second arm if he does stay. So I really think it's important for them to get a hitter. And lastly, they just need to gain back that energy and swagger that they had in the season prior. The Gators. So the Gators actually had a surprisingly good season this year. They didn't take a major jump like the Magic did where they were just dominant, but they are slowly getting better. I really like what Jason Chadwick did for the team this year, and Sawyer Bean, just no matter what team he goes on, it feels like he's kind of that team's identity, and he's really shaped this Gators team. Also, I think some credit has to go to Chris Cheatham as he stepped up being the new manager. He made a great trade, got rid of Jorgie, got rid of Zerlag, and brought in Sawyer Bean, obviously, and got that pick to get Jeremy Adams. So what do they need to do? Well, with that second pick, they need to either get somebody who can probably hit and pitch, or they need Jeremy Adams to develop a lot, and maybe they can take a risk at number 2 as well. I don't think the Gators should be making a lot of moves in the offseason, but I do think that their team is good enough to go into the next season and at least compete. The Predators. So the Predators obviously took really good steps in the right direction this year. They're also in a pretty weak AL where they were able to claim the number 1 seed despite not having the best record in the world. Here's the thing. Ryan Cratch is going to do his thing, and it is what it is. Levi Fleer, for the most part, was really good, especially in the playoffs. I know I made a video about him not winning Rookie of the Year. I still believe that he's a big part of this team. Then there is also the fact that Alec Warda had a really good year as well. In my opinion, though, this team comes down to, can they get a really solid second hitter? And I think it comes down to Brendan Russell or Rudy Ramirez. One of them needs to step up, and I think if they do, and the Predators have the same success as they had this year, they should be just fine for next year. The Eagles. So I know the Eagles had a good year and stuff, but there are still a lot of question marks on their season for sure. The first one is Zach Whalen and is Blade Walker, are they going to be back on this team next year? Now, Blade didn't show up a lot this season, Zach didn't show up a lot this season, and there's been some talk on whether they're going to show up. I think if they come back to the team has an amazing chance of running it back. Also, are they going to choose somebody with that 8th overall pick? I know it's a pick that is far away, but if Zach Whalen and or Blade Walker do leave, they're going to need to use that pick. Also, is Daniel Schultz going to have the same season he had this year? I really hope so. I love Daniel Schultz, and I like to see him do good for sure, so I really do hope so. Dallas Allen, in my opinion, I think it's pretty obvious. He's this team's rock. He's this team's best player. I mean, he's so dominant, so hard to stop. And the Eagles have a really good team. For them, it's about not losing things. Wildcats. So the Wildcats obviously did not have a great season this year, but in my opinion, they have the chance to really set the record straight this year. They have the 1st overall pick, and there's a lot that they could do with that. I think Kyle is ready to make a splash. This is 2 disappointing years in a row, and they didn't even make the playoffs this year, which the Wildcats usually make the playoffs every year. So that's got to be a wake-up call, number 1. Here's what they need, though, for next year. Pat Ballman, he just needs to take a huge step. I think he has the ability to. He definitely has the physical needs to take the step up. He's huge. He needs to get better on the mound. He needs to get better at the plate. But I think he's extremely dedicated. I think he won most dedicated. He works super hard. I know he has the ability to do so. So that is not a huge concern. He's still really young. The second thing is going to be Pearson and Saylor, mostly Saylor. Can Saylor have a bounce back year? This is now 2 years in a row. Saylor's done bad, Wildcats have done bad. He seems to be kind of the X factor on this team. So really, it's about Saylor, it's about Ballman, and they got to hit big with this first pick. I'm hoping you get a second arm, maybe somebody that could hit. A dual threat would be perfect, but I think the hitting is the most important thing with this team. The Mallards. There is a lot of questions with this Mallards team too. Even though they were able to make the playoffs, I would say they had a disappointing year. I don't really think it's Jorgie's fault. Obviously, I don't think it's Robles' fault. I think that it sucks for Robles that he has to drive or fly so far to the game when he gets to play. I think that's something that doesn't help this team. I think Preston Colm stepped it up a ton, and that's really exciting to see. Really, this team's downfall, and I'm not trying to be a jerk when I say this, but you have to put it on TC3's shoulders. He's the manager, he is the leader of this team, and you could just tell it was not all there this season. But I really do think he will bounce back. I'm pretty confident in it. He's been so consistent for so many years. So that's the one thing. The second thing is you'd like to draft a guy that can get the job done. You'd like to draft a second arm maybe, because that's what they need more than anything, a consistent second arm. You don't need to do too much of the work. Just win like 3 or 4 games a season as a second arm, and that would be perfect for this team. So that is the video, everybody. Please let me know what you think of each of these teams' problems. Leave a comment about what you would do, maybe on a certain team. If you disagree with me, it's all good. And yeah, I appreciate y'all. Make sure you subscribe. More videos coming down later. Peace.